Hello, and welcome to The Other 3 Years. I'm Christine O'Donnell. You have seen me a few times. I am a producer. I'm often behind the scenes. And joining me here is Colleen Saville. She is a commentator for World Rowing, and we both know Kristi. So seeing she will not be doing an update this week, we wanted to come in here and talk a little bit about how she's been performing. Thank you so much for being here, Colleen.
Yeah, my pleasure. Hi, everyone. What a thrill to be here. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you know Kristi? I mean, we've had you on the show, but what is your relationship?
My relationship to Kristi, oh gosh. Well, first and foremost, I just want to call out if you hear my 3-month-old in the background. So he's jumping into the conversation here and there. You might pick up a little bit of his talking on the audio. But my relationship to Kristi, gosh, I wish I got to spend more time with her than I do, but it's been a real thrill following her trajectory over the past handful of years. Kristi, of course, rose, as we all know, at Orion, the elite Olympic feeder program in upstate New York in Saratoga Springs. I have the opportunity to commentate on many of her races as part of World Rowing. And so I'm a massive fan. That's my relationship to Kristi. Putnam Market, if you know it, Saratogians. Hi, Cal. Have a sandwich named after Kristi. And so my relationship to Putnam Market is that I always order the Kristi Wagner sandwich. But no, I'm a massive fan and really have been enjoying following along on her Olympic journey.
I would be remiss to not share that Colleen and I rowed together in high school. And when I say rowed together, like I was rowing and she was yelling at me.
Fair point. You were in the 60s. I was in the
So it's like
seat.
we're just all back together here in the rowing world, kind of like living vicariously through Kristi's podcast and her races at the Olympics. And we are recording this Tuesday afternoon, July 30th. The podcast will be coming out on Friday morning, so it will be August 2nd. At this point, we have watched her semifinal, which happened today. And by the time you are listening to this, she will have competed in the grand final. But we're not going to have those results for you in the podcast. Still, we wanted to share a little bit of our thoughts about what we do know, where she is so far.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing race that we were able to see Kristi compete in earlier today in the semifinals. It's the Olympics, so this is implicit. What a stacked field, of course, but especially in that particular race that they were in, and the folks that they were alongside. Romania, the two-time defending world and Olympic champions in this boat class. They went off the line, Christine, at 53 strokes per minute. And what's incredible about the Romanians in particular is that those two women in the double actually doubled up to race in the 8 as well, which is kind of unheard of at the Olympic level. So the Romanians are having a really, really good Olympic showing. They crushed the women's 8 heat. They won that really impressively. And so, for folks, of course, that saw Kristi's race, you'll have seen the Romanians somewhere around 500 to go, or even fewer, I think 400 or so, surge, to the line to cross first. So absolutely incredible and dominant performance from them. Great Britain, great performance. Australia early on as well. Unfortunately for the Aussies, as we saw, it was heartbreak. So they lost that last qualifying spot to Norway, I think by 0.2 of a second, with the Americans, Kristi coming in 5th overall. So, what a spectacular race, a real thrill to watch, and really excited, I think, to hear from Kristi when, she gets back.
Like, just to recap for the listeners. So what happened today is Kristi did not make the A grand final. She will be moving forward to the B grand final, which means she's fallen outside of the final that would get a first, second, or third place medal, which we know Kristi really was pushing for. And because you've been listening with her.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Christine. So the A-level final contests for positions overall 1 through 6. So it's the medals final. And then the B level final will contest for positions 7 through 12. So by default, as you said, if you're in that B level final, then you're off the podium. And so, as mentioned, like an absolutely incredible race, amazing speed in that race, and really proud of Kristi and Sophia, of course. And so she said to US Rowing, when they had a chance to catch up, she said, I think that we'll be ready to race on Thursday. Right now, this feels pretty devastating, and nothing that we did in training predicted that this was what should happen. I wish there was an explanation, because that would make sense in my mind. We've both done a lot to get here, and this was not the result that we wanted, but it's okay to not achieve your goal sometimes and be upset about it, which is honest and true.
It's okay to not achieve your goals sometimes and be upset about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially at that level where, Christine, you said something really interesting before we started.
So I was talking to another coach who works with Olympians and elite athletes about what do you do when you expect more of yourself than you achieve at the Olympics. And like, you're on the world stage, you already have so many eyeballs on you. And not only do you have your own expectations, you have an entire country's expectations on you. And so, I mean, of course, there's a lot of pressure there. And I think that Kristi has done an amazing job when it comes to just like staying focused on what she's had to stay focused on. But I was just like, what do you do when like you don't necessarily hit your expectations, or you fall short of the expectations you set for yourself? And Janice had shared with me, she was saying that who you are and what happens at the Olympian level is not just that one day. It's the 3 to 4 years of discipline and dedication and mindset and will. All of that stuff is hugely a part of the person that you have become, and it will trickle down into every aspect of your life. And it is incredibly powerful. That does not mean that you can't be upset, but I think that it's important to know that it's not just this one day that completely defines you. And I think it's just that pressure that sometimes makes it feel like it is. But to me, like, as her producer, I am massively proud of her and inspired by her, and I love her. And I love that quote. She's always been honest and open and authentic and sharing herself in this show. And I'm glad that I've got to be a part of her journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Yeah, and for those who maybe haven't seen the race, you can watch it on Peacock on demand, and it was a fantastic race that they put together. So looking forward to seeing them race on Thursday. And tomorrow is a very exciting day because the first Olympic rowing medals will be awarded in the quads, I believe. So really looking forward to starting to hear those national anthems. Yeah, today short, but certainly like critical day of racing for the singles and doubles in particular.
And there were some really great performances by the rowing team in other aspects. Like the men's 8 totally crushed their, was it their semi or their heat today?
I think it was their heat, and now they go directly to the final. I think because it's a smaller field of however many entries, something like 8, so they're directly in the A final.
Yeah, and I think Kara Kohler singles, I know she won her heat. I'm not sure.
Yes, she advanced as well. Her placement, I'm trying to remember. I mean, that's such a deep field, the singles always are. But I do know that she'll advance, and she had a good race overall.
Awesome. And do you know about Molly? Molly's been on the show.
Oh, yeah, of course. Gosh, another super competitive field, like taking a look at the results from let's see, I believe they still have the semifinals. So at this point, they've raced the heats, and The U.S. was able to skip the repechage, so Molly Reckford and Michelle Sexer, like veterans of the sport. I think this is like their 5th Olympic Games. Folks can keep me honest. But they finished second in their heat behind Romania. That was July 28th, so a couple days ago. And then well ahead of the rest of the field. I think it was Peru, Japan, and it was the top 2 to semifinal A, B. So they're doing very well. That's certainly what we would expect. And in their semifinal A, B, which is tomorrow, they go up against Canada and Great Britain and New Zealand, Poland and Argentina. So it'll be a fantastic race. And it's top 3, Christine, to the A final. So that's the last round to get into that medals round. But they're moving quite well.
I was just looking at US Rowing, which is like my app for all things like Olympics these days, and I was just looking at what else we could share, perhaps, that the men's double advanced to the A finals, the women's four advanced to the A finals. And it looks like the U.S. rowing team is hanging out with the USA rugby team right now, which...
Oh, I love that.
Yes. Which is some pretty cool behind-the-scene content from U.S. rowing. So...
Making films. I love that. That's
awesome. That's a huge part of it. Like, just being there with, like, in the Olympic Village with the athletes has to be so much fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think some other notable things, not surprisingly, the temperatures are rising. So certainly like keeping cool and, staying hydrated and all of that will be top of mind for these athletes. But I think it is getting quite sunny and hot out there. And I'm excited. There's so much to look forward to. I'm excited for all of the events to come. Excited for the singles. You mentioned Kara Kohler, of course, for the US, who's doing well, and the men's singles as well. We'll see if Ali Zeidler from Germany, he's been like a class act in that event for a handful of years, if he takes home his first gold Olympic medal. And then the 8s are such a spectacle. They're so fun.
I mean,
so the women's, the men's.
The 8s like bring me back. They bring me back. So
I know.
The speed of the 8s is just so exciting.
Yes. So lots to look forward to. And as you said, we'll have more information, or the world will have more information by the time this airs. But so far so good. Medals kick off tomorrow.
That's exciting. In this episode of The Other 3 Years, Kristi is interviewing Rudy Winkler, who is also from the Capital Region of New York State. And they talked about just a number of things in this episode, including if he has any superstitions, which I always think is interesting. And Rudy is competing for Team USA in the men's hammer throw event. And if you are a Matilda fan, you are probably imagining the Trench Bowl right now. And I'm there with you. Without further ado, let's toss to their interview with Kristi and Rudy. And Colleen, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, what a pleasure. Huge congratulations to everyone competing, and really looking forward to seeing all the good racing to come. Congrats to Kristi and Sophia. Take care.
And if you end up watching me throw at the Olympics, you'll know when I have a good throw or not based on how I usually say, like, I yell like an ah, and then I say come on. But depending on the tone of the come on will be dependent on how good the throw was. So if it's like, come on, then you know it's a bad throw. Or if it's like a come on, you know it was a good throw. I don't even really realize I do it until I watch the videos after.
Welcome to The Other 3 Years, a show for anyone who has an Olympic-sized dream they want to turn into a reality. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Other 3 Years podcast. My name is Kristi Wagner, and this week I have a super fun Olympic episode for you guys, which makes sense because it's during the Olympics when this is coming out. This week, I have 3-time Olympian and upstate New York native, Rudy Winkler. Rudy's a hammer thrower for Team USA, and he's competing right now at his 3rd Olympics in Paris. Rudy qualified for his first Olympics when he was still in college at Cornell and has been at the top of the throwing game since then. Rudy and I had an awesome conversation talking about how he got into hammer, what those early days were like. We also talked a lot about balancing sport and life for him and the mental challenges of his sport and how he's worked to overcome some of those challenges. It was a really great conversation. I found I had a lot in common with Rudy, so it was fun to connect and share our stories. I'm recording this intro a little early since I'm also competing at the Olympics right now. Well, when this comes out, I'll actually have finished competing. But because of that, I don't really have an update on training, except to say I'm super excited to race really hard and just grateful for the support from all of you. And don't worry, I'll be back with a recap of how everything went. So without further ado, it's time for my conversation with 3-time Olympian Rudy Winkler. All right, Rudy, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast and to ask you a lot of questions.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this.
To start out, I'm very curious how you got into hammer throwing. Do you just call it hammer throwing? What would you say?
That's a good question. How do you how do I colloquially I guess I say I throw the hammer, or I'm a hammer thrower.
Okay.
Yeah.
Throw the hammer. How did you get into that? I mean, I do a bit of a niche sport, but I've got to assume it's a little bit more niche. So I'm super interested in how that all got started for you.
Yeah, I think the year was either 4th grade or 5th grade. I was doing baseball at the time, but I hated it. And my parents wanted me to do some sort of sport. And my town had a peewee track club called the Averill Park Roadrunners. So I started doing that. They kind of thought I would run. I was always a really big kid, so they wanted me to lose a little weight maybe and run and get into it that way. But I ended up finding the shot put and kind of gravitated towards the field events in general anyway, and your size is kind of celebrated in the shot. So I think I fell into place and felt more welcome there from the start, and was also just a big kid, so was really good at it. So started with the shot, and then I kind of started throwing the discus, which are a little bit more popular. People tend to know those two throwing events. And then in middle school, just kind of met some coaches and athletes who had been doing the hammer, and the indoor version of it is called the weight. It's similar technique, but it's only 1.5 feet long, and it's in high school it's 25 pounds. For professionals it's 35 pounds, whereas the hammer's 3 feet long, and for professionals it's 16 pounds. High schoolers it's 12 pounds, so it's smaller, heavier, it doesn't go as far. My high school competed in that, so I got a chance to kind of try that there, and then the coaches I met through that kind of pushed me towards trying the hammer. And with the shot and the disc, I was kind of good at it just because of my size, and I really enjoyed doing it. And then kind of just through meets, met this guy, Paddy McGrath, who was an Irish Olympian in the event, and he started coaching me, and then it became my primary event, and I ended up doing it through college, and I still compete in it professionally. So it kind of happened organically through just being involved with track and field in general. And I think every thrower eventually tries hammer at some point. I just got to try it a little bit earlier than some, and stuck with it the longest of my friends in the sport that I know.
Mm-hmm. And so when you were younger and you were first doing track and field, did you do any of the track events as well?
Yeah, I did. Which is really funny you ask, because I did. At the start, I tried doing the mile for some reason. So my practices, and the track club would make you do a running event and a field event. That was how to split up the practices. So I would I would do the mile so that I could just jog, on my own pace until I got to go throw. But I think I competed it in a few times. I tried to do the sprints, but I always thought I was fast, and then I met the kids who actually sprinted and did the 100, and they just whooped me, so I stopped doing that. And then I did a little high jump for a little bit, which was also kind of funny because I was like this really
Wow.
big kid. Yeah, it was pretty funny. My first couple meets, I would run the mile, go do the high jump, and then I would run over and do the shot put. And it was like such a weird mix of events, but it was fun.
No, that's super fun. The only time I did track and field was in middle school, but we had to do both track and field events. And they also were like, you should do the shot put. And I was comically bad at it. I'm also I'm very tall, but especially when I was younger, I had like absolutely no upper body strength. And I think that our gym teacher was the coach. And I think he was just like shocked at how bad I was. And so he tried to pretend it wasn't quite so bad. And then I came in last place in every meet. Like, I think they should have been like, oh, you should do something else. But he was like, there was no one else to do the shot put or whatever. So yeah, it was pretty.
You probably thought you had those long levers. Can you
Yeah.
get it out there?
Yeah, but instead it was just like, ugh, really bad. But it was fun. Like, I mean, I thought track and field was super fun. And I loved how at practice you got to do so many different things. Like, I feel like that was the most fun part of it.
Yeah. I think that's the thing about track is there's something for everybody, obviously. I mean, there's the endurance distance stuff, there's the speed stuff, there's the jumps, there's the throws. I mean, like, if you can't find an event that you fit into a track, then I don't know, maybe you're just not into sports because there's plenty to do. And that's kind of the beauty of it. And especially as I've grown up through it, you meet so many interesting people from so many different backgrounds who are really good at this like niche one event. I find those people super interesting.
Yeah. So at what point during your time rowing the hammer, at first was it just like, oh, this is a really cool thing, I like doing it, maybe I could do it in like college? Or did you sort of have national team Olympic aspirations like right from the get-go? When did that seed start to be planted?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, track is one of those things, I'm sure you have a similar feeling with rowing, where it's your sport is the Olympics. Like, there isn't really like a professional league for us to compete in. There is kind of, but for the hammer specifically, there really is not many professional opportunities. And so from the start, that's like, you know, the dream is to make an Olympic team or to make a world championship team. But you kind of just do it for fun at the start. And because I started so young, much younger than most people. So most people start the hammer when they're in college. They'll do shot and disc in high school. And then when they're in college, they'll get to try the hammer because it's more contested then. It's pretty rare that a high schooler, it's less rare now, but when I was in high school and then before my time, you pretty much would only throw the hammer if you had a coach that would push you to do it, or if you grew up in Rhode Island, which is the only state that had actual like sanctioned high school events with the hammer. So I started a lot younger than a lot of people. And because of that, I got to do some youth and junior events. My sophomore year, I qualified for Youth World Championships, which was this trip to Lille, France, which was really cool. I mean, it was a World Championships. It was structured the same way as like a professional World Championships, and you got like the Team USA kit and all that stuff. It was really like an awesome experience, and it kind of let me dip my toes into that world and understand what there could be to like strive for goals later on. And that was really cool. You had to win nationals to make that team. So probably a little bit before that, when I was training for that, I was kind of like, oh, this is like something I could potentially do. And it became part of my identity really early on, probably 7th, 8th grade, a couple years in. I was just really into it and really passionate about it. I just kind of fully engulfed myself in the sport, and it always just was something that I wanted to do and didn't really question. And after that youth team, it was like, okay, well, now let's go for the junior team next year. And then I started looking at colleges and never really questioned like, oh, should I be doing this? Should I be doing something else? It was always just, oh, I'm a hammer thrower now, and I'm just going to put myself in a position to be able to do this, which is kind of funny because I feel like I've kind of gone away from that in recent years, where now I feel like I'm a real adult and I have other hobbies and interests and things that I would like to be doing. And sometimes throwing hammer gets in the way of doing those things. But I mean, we can get into that separately. But yeah, that was a really, really long-winded answer to basically say it's probably like 8th, 9th grade. I was like, this is really something that I enjoy doing, and I think I'm just gonna keep doing it.
Yeah. Special thanks to our sponsor, Discover Saratoga. Discover Saratoga is a one-stop shop for all things Saratoga. Their mission is to drive growth in the local economy by promoting and marketing Saratoga County as a must-visit destination for leisure traveling, meetings, conventions, and events. We work with Discover Saratoga at Saratoga Rowing, and they have been impactful in helping make our events a great experience for the local community and visitors alike. If you live in Saratoga or are visiting this summer, be sure to head to discoversaratoga.org to learn more about all they have to offer. And be sure to take advantage of their free family-friendly concert series in Congress Park, which is every Sunday in July and every Tuesday in August, and the concerts start at 7 p.m. I think it's really interesting, and I'm not sure exactly what's true for Hammer, but like in a sport like rowing, especially for women, you peak in your early 30s, like physiologically. But to have a life where you can be like still in the sport and still enjoying the sport and have like a full rounded life that's allowing you to still be doing a sport, especially that's not a super professional sport. Like, I mean, I'm not a professional athlete, you know, we're not paid to do a sport. So I think it's like really interesting sort of how you create that balance. And I feel like that you must have found at least like some of that balance in your life to be, you know, just qualified for your 3rd Olympic team and, you know, still improving. Like, so how do you think that you've morphed your life into a sense that it can support you as you get older, but still support sport? If that, I don't think I worded that question that well, but I think you understand.
No, I know exactly what you mean though. Like I said before, it was always just something, I don't know, when you're younger, especially high school, middle school age, you just do whatever is the most fun in that moment. You don't really think twice about like the future. At least I didn't. I never was a big planner. I always struggled with those questions where they'd be like, in 10 years, where do you see yourself as an adult? And it was always like, I'm just trying to get through the rest of the week. So that was good for me in some ways. And then it also gave me a lot of challenges. I think in ways it made me kind of take school more seriously. So like beginning of high school, I kind of realized like, oh, I could go to school and do this. I didn't really take middle school that seriously. My parents never really were like very pushy with like trying to get really good grades. So I was like a solid C, B- student through middle school, and then got to high school and was like, oh, I could do this thing. I could throw hammer in college, but I also need to have decent grades in order to get into the colleges that I'd be interested in. So then I started taking school more seriously because of it, which is really interesting. But it's funny coming from a lens of like, I want to do well in school because I want to do this sport versus like, I want to do well in school because I care about these things and I'm interested in them. That thread kind of followed through like later in high school and into college. I mean, I definitely was doing the things I was interested in. I was more of like a STEM student and engineering student through high school. So I wanted to do that in college, but I never really had like a career in mind. I never really had like any specific life goals outside of track and field that I considered when I was making those decisions. I just kind of was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm going to focus in it so that I can, so it enables me to do this sport. I think part of that was like, I wanted to do engineering. So I'm from upstate New York and I went to Cornell for school, and they have like a state school program. So the tuition is a lot cheaper for certain schools because it's considered a SUNY school, considered a state school. So I did that. I went to the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, did a program in information science, and my plan was to switch to the engineering school once I had like a year or two and got some requirements out of the way. But I got there and I was like, this stuff is like kind of easy and interesting, and maybe eventually I'd be able to get a job in like programming or something so that I can support my track and field habit. Making decisions like that at the time was pretty interesting because it wasn't something that I necessarily was super passionate about. And it has put me in a position now where I enjoy doing those things, and I still work. I have a part-time job. I work in cybersecurity, and I find the stuff interesting, but I wouldn't consider it a passion. And I'm kind of going through a phase now where I'm looking back at the things I've done and looking forward at the future and having to ask myself, like, is this a career I want to be doing? Like, when I'm done throwing, what do I see myself doing as a professional career? And I still don't really know, which is interesting that, like, being a hammer thrower has become such a big part of my identity that I've kind of struggled to find those other aspects of my life, you know? I don't know if you faced that, but
Yeah.
it's also tough. You spend so much time doing this thing, and as you know, it's like it becomes such a big part of you and your life. The idea of not doing it is like scary in the sense of like, am I going to find something else that I feel this passionate about and be able to make a career out of it and do it for the rest of my life? Because sport is unfortunately temporary. You can only do it for so long. And luckily, like rowing, like you said, you peak kind of in your early 30s. Throwing is very similar. I mean, the world record was thrown, I think he was 36. Most of the competitors I compete with overseas, they're all in their mid to late 30s, other than a handful of them. So it's something you can do for a really long time, but I just don't know if I have the energy to do it that long. But yeah, it's funny. You set up your whole life to do these things, and then you kind of neglect the other things that most other people were doing. But you find them slowly, I guess. But I'm curious to hear what your experience actually is with that now, and how much longer you're going to do it, and if you have other ideas of what you're going to do after.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also like I heard somewhere from someone that you can't actually give 100% to more than one thing. So like in life, like whatever that is that you're giving 100% to, whether it's school or sports or like later in life your family or whatever, you're taking things from other areas of life and not giving 100% there. And that like gave me a little bit of comfort, I guess, in the sense that hopefully like when I do retire from rowing, and like I've worked part-time my entire athletic career or full-time.
Yeah.
But I agree, it's like, I don't know like who I am without this. And it is scary because you're like, okay, but did I just miss like a decade of my life when I could have been career developing, towards whatever my passion or whatever would be like.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that's, I don't know if it's helpful or hurtful, is that I think that there's plenty of people who've been working that whole time and still feel that way. So
yeah,
it is a challenge.
No, I agree. I think I talk with all my friends who have like regular corporate jobs, and they all look at what I'm doing and they're like, oh, it's so cool that you get to compete still and still are doing the sport that you like grew up doing and are finding success in it. And then meanwhile, I'm looking at them like, I'm very jealous of your normal lives and your normal jobs. It's like, it's one of those like grass is always greener things. And that's not I'm making it sound like I don't appreciate what I am doing. No, like, I love what I'm doing.
You're not.
I couldn't really picture myself doing anything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is funny. It's one of those things. I think people don't really realize that at the end of the day, like this is kind of a job in a way where at a certain point when you do it as a quote unquote professional, when you're an Olympian, it very is like clock in, clock out. You get your workouts in, you do what you're supposed to do. And like, you have fun doing it, but it's not the same as when you were in high school or college when you first started and it was just like a chance for you to hang out with your friends and have a good time. Like it's much more serious than that, and it feels much more like a job than I think most people realize.
No, I totally agree with that. And that kind of segues pretty well into something else I wanted to ask you about. Obviously, like the track and field team for the US is like a massive team. Like you were alluding to, there's so many different events that you can participate in. How much, if at all, like does it feel like a team? And do you still feel that team aspect of the sport, being like an individual athlete in such a big team sport?
I would say no, not with the bigger teams like Olympics and Worlds. It is so individual. And there's an aspect to it where it's like, a lot of these people who are on the team are my friends who I've competed with for so many years. So I support them in that sense, but less so from a team perspective. I mean, college was really my first experience because I mean, I started doing this really young. I did baseball when I was really young, but I never really got the team aspect of sport through middle school and high school because I didn't participate in team sports. When I got to college was when I first kind of experienced that team dynamic where you had to, your individual performance played into a much bigger picture. And I haven't had that with these like Team USA teams. There definitely is like more camaraderie in the individual event groups. Like the throwers tend to stick together and support each other and cheer for each other. And you kind of, spill over in other events here and there, but you do generally stick with those individual groups, which are much, much smaller. Like there's 12 throwers on a Olympic team versus however many there are for the whole team, 90 something like that. So super interesting question though. I do kind of miss that from college, definitely though.
So like those, you'd probably room with like the other throwers and.
Yeah. Room with them. I mean, you end up training with them too. You spend most of your time with those people through your day to day when you're at these types of meets. And we see each other the most throughout the year because we're always at the same events. So going into meets like this, you already are kind of friendly with not just like Team USA athletes, but also all the athletes from other countries as well.
Yeah. How does like the coaching work? Because if every athlete has their own coach, they can't let everyone bring a coach, right? Or can they?
They do, to an extent. I mean,
wow.
USA track and field has what's called the tier system. So if you're above a certain ranking or if you meet certain criteria for the previous season, you get a certain amount of funding from the USOPC, and you get put into some of their like high performance programs. And part of that is they'll help fund your coach to go to either Olympics or World Championships. So yeah, everyone has their own individual coach. Some coaches will coach multiple athletes, but for the most part, it's like a one-to-one. Like every athlete has their individual coach. And there is like a team coach, there's a team throws coach for every world or Olympic team, right? But they're more of like a logistical person to make sure you have schedules and get on the bus on time and things like that. Yeah, it's super interesting. That is one of the things that I don't even really think about with other sports. It's like I'm sure with the rowing team, you just have the Team USA rowing coach, right?
Yeah, it is a little bit interesting. So we do have like boat coaches.
Okay.
But some share coaches, so there's probably like 6 to 8 coaches for like the whole team. And there's like 50 of us, I think.
Do you have your own individual coach when you're like?
So we are a non-centralized system right now. So I row for a high performance team in Saratoga Springs. I have a coach there who's actually also one of the Olympic coaches, but he's not my boat coach. But then also like I row in a 2-person boat. This is our 3rd year rowing together, and we've been coached really by like the same people for a while. So it's not like all of a sudden you get like a brand new coach. Like rowing's a kind of small sport, so it's not like there's tons of coaches even to like pick from, because also just logistically, like it's pretty hard for college coaches to like schedule wise come in, and you know what I mean? So totally. Most of the coaches have been around for a while, and even if they're not coaching you right now, maybe they've coached you in the past, or so it's pretty familiar, I'd say.
That's cool. Is there big differences? And I ask this because I think a big reason each athlete has their own coach and doesn't kind of fall under a coaching system, whether it be a coach at one coach coaching a bunch of people. There's like a lot of different schools of thought and like types of training and types of technique development in the throws. Everyone kind of has, their own needs as an athlete, and physical differences and mental differences, and you just like mesh very differently with different coaches. So that's kind of why everyone kind of has their own coach, because it's either you met a high school coach who had a certain school of thought and that translated well to your college coach, and then you kind of stuck with your college coach after that, or maybe like you moved on to his old coach. That kind of thing happens a lot. Is there big differences between coaches with rowing, or is there like generally like an accepted way to coach and everyone kind of fits within that?
Yes, there is, and it is more similar to what you're talking about.
Mm.
But I would say that in this quadrennial, we have a new like head of the US rowing national team for this quadrennial, and he's much more like, I write the training program, all of the athletes participate in the training program, there are checkpoints, there are like, we upload all of our workouts and such so that they know that we're doing the training program they want us to be doing. And like that's one of the criteria for like you were talking about those USOPC, like tier A, tier B, tiers, like that's one of the criteria for like us getting our funding and being invited to camps and all of those things. So I think it's been actually hard for the coaches to like figure out how they can fall inside that system but still do their own things sometimes. But like in college, 100%, like coaches are pretty different. And it's funny because rowing seems so simple and like it should just always be the same, but there's definitely different schools of thought.
Yeah, no, I mean, you could say that about especially the Olympic sports. You look at any of the Olympic sports and you could think like, oh, how different it is between athlete to athlete, but it doesn't surprise me at all. Even though it's like, it looks like you guys are all doing the same thing. It's just like who you are as a person, and it's just going to work better with certain styles of coaching over others, you know?
Yeah. How much of what you do you consider like a mental game? And has that been something that you've worked on over the years?
I mean, at this point in my career, that's like 98% of what it is. I have the physical strength. I have a coach who we're very in tune with like the technical side of it. I guess part of the mental side of it is I kind of group together with technique. Technique is just like a general term that we all the throwers kind of use to describe like the specific movements we do. Because like a regular person looking at what we do, you'll see it's like, oh, that's all the same type of movement, but then you realize how many little details and intricacies there are between people and just how they think and approach the sport. I think now at this point in my career, I talk to other athletes who maybe have had a similarly long career, and their perception of what the throw feels or looks like is totally different than how I perceive it, right? Yeah, the mental part of it is big. I have a sports psych, this guy, Dr. Nick Molinaro. He used to do mostly golf coaching. I think he also does like race car mental coaching now too. Race car driver mental coaching now, which is super interesting. But yeah, that's a big part of it for me. In my, I call it my best season. The season I threw my personal best in the American record, I was working really, really hard on like mental skills, was doing lots of meditations, was doing lots of like visualizations and things that would kind of prep me for performances, and definitely paid off that year. But I've always struggled at the like elite, like Olympic world championship level. And I think this kind of goes back to the idea of like, it's such a big part of my identity. When I get to those big competitions, I want to do well to like prove to myself that everything I'm doing is worth it. You know, you want to be able to walk away with a medal and be like, cool, all those years I spent doing that sport feel like they were worth something, when that's really not what the sport's about. Like getting a medal has no impact on who you are as a person. And like the journey that got you there is really what is the most important part, regardless of what the outcome is. And it's those things that like I try to remind myself of. But it's hard, as you know, as an athlete. I'm sure you understand how that like gets very difficult to deal with as an athlete. So it's funny, like those types of emotional battles definitely affect my training and my mental well-being the most. And with a highly technical event, any sort of like stress or feeling of self-doubt definitely gets in the way. So super, super mental, which is frustrating and very cool at the same time, because you end up learning a lot about yourself in the process of doing this.
Yeah. I can only imagine. I feel like also just the fact that you have like all of the turns.
Yeah.
Do you watch what other people are doing, or are you just like trying to like zone it out? Like if someone else has a good throw, do you find that like motivational? Like I don't know. I'm so interested.
It's tough. I mean, I try not to watch people throw just because like I'll notice things in their throw and like subconsciously I start thinking about my own throw and it just doesn't, I usually just don't watch. But yeah, I mean, if people have big results, that definitely has gotten to me in the past. Even the trials this past weekend, it was the best trials. Like the top 12 had all thrown further than any other trials. Like it was just a through and through wonderful meet. Whereas like years past, like I opened up with a throw like 75-50 something. In years past, that would have been top 3. It would have made the team. Wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But after the first round of throws, I was already down to like 5th or 6th place. So I was like, okay, well, I can't just have like an easy throw. I have to actually like go out and compete. And it was the first time I had to do that all season. So like I definitely had a lot of nerves and a lot of adrenaline, which is one of those things that really affects the way you execute technique. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, everyone develops their own skills when they do these types of things. It's really just like finding your space and staying in your process as best you can despite all these like crazy stimulus around you.
Yeah. I can like only imagine. I don't know. I think the thing I like about rowing is that it's like one and done, and like also our coaches can't interact with us when we have rounds, but like they can't interact with us when we're out on the water and we're racing. And so like you just have the whole race to sort of like, if you didn't have a great start, like you have time to fix it before you get to the finish line. And like I don't know, I just like that for those like 2,000 meters I have like that whole time to just do my thing.
Yeah.
And it like you don't have time to think really in there. Of course, then you have plenty of time to overthink before the next race.
Of course.
But yeah.
Yeah, you have nothing but time to think in the throwing events especially, but the field events are very, with track, are like that. It's like you have one attempt, that attempt takes less than a minute, right? I mean, the actual time in the circle for me where I'm like actually actively throwing, it's like 6 seconds. But you're at the meet for an hour, right? So it's all that time in between. You're just sitting there and stewing in whatever, mental space you're in at that moment. There's your approach to individual throws, but then there's your approach to the overall competition. And those are both equally important, especially at a high level. It's like how you throw is just as important as like how you manage yourself during the meet. And if you go in, you don't have that confidence, or you don't have like, you don't have those specific feelings that you typically look for in a good throw, it can get to your head and it can lead you down a path where you're just getting very nervous and stressful. Yeah, it's tough, but I think through that I've learned a lot of really cool skills, like mental skills, just about like high performance. And there's skills that I feel like I've been able to apply to, like, I work a day job as well in high pressure situations, and like, having to get a presentation or something prepared, or you have to like present something to people, do like public speaking. The skills that I've learned having to deal with those challenges have definitely applied in a lot of other places of my life, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. How excited are you? Did you think you would make 3 Olympic teams? Like, you obviously made your first team when you were in college. Like, if you were to go back there, do you think you could tell that person, like, you're going to make 2 more teams, and I don't know if you're going to keep going after this. Like, that's pretty incredible. Like, how do you feel about that? We haven't even gone to Paris yet.
I know, it is crazy. I mean, 2016 was weird because like you said, I was in college, and at the beginning of that year, I didn't think I was going, like, it wasn't on my radar at all. I knew I was good enough to make it to the trials because I had qualified for a national championship the year prior. But it really wasn't on my radar that I'd be in the running to go to the Olympics. And then at our conference championship, I had a really big PR. At the time, it was the best mark in the US. And that was like the moment where I was like, holy crap, I really could go to the trials and not just compete, but like have a chance at getting top 3 and maybe make the Olympic team. And then a bunch of weird stuff happened. I kept training through the summer and like threw at a couple of meets that ended up not counting as like real meets. And I threw really far at them and they would have been Olympic qualifying marks. But because of that, a bunch of people thought that I was like cheating or like throwing light hammers, or that's an unfortunate thing with our sport is like there is or used to be a lot of cheating like that where people would go to like weird dodgy meets and throw light hammers, or they would just kind of make up marks so they could qualify for the Olympics. So it wasn't surprising that people thought that way, but going into the trials, I had like something to prove. I was like, I have to prove that I'm not a cheater. So it was less about qualifying for the Olympics and more about just like proving to myself and proving to other people that I could do it. And I did. I ended up winning the trials and made the team, and that all just kind of like happened and like was a whole blur, and I wasn't prepared for the Olympics at all. And then 2021, it was like my best season ever leading into the championships and the trials. Like going into it, I was at a level where I just knew I was going to qualify. It was just a matter of how far I was going to throw at the trials. But then was kind of burnt out after that. Trials was like a really emotional experience for me, and then I had a really hard time regrouping after that. And by the time I got to the Tokyo, I mean I was in good shape, but like mentally I was just like super burnt out. Physically I was pretty burnt out, and I just didn't have the meat that I was expecting to. So this time around I'm definitely excited. It's been kind of a strange season where I've had some like weird naggy injury things, but I'm in good health now, and I made the team on a day that like wasn't particularly my best. And going into Paris, I'm just excited, I think, to have another chance to compete this year and have a chance to like show myself how much progress I've made the past year. But also I feel like through doing all this and through all this mental work that we've already talked about, I've kind of gotten like a little bit more, I almost call it like spiritual in a way, where like I just feel a little bit more connected to like myself and the world, and I'm excited to just be there with like friends and enjoy that experience from that lens versus from like a lens in 2021 and 2016 where I was just like very stressed and being so focused that I kind of got lost in that process. I'm excited to go be with friends, be with family, and to just like take the experience in for what it is and just like have a chance at competing rather than trying to go for some specific goal there. It's super exciting. It's and to say I'm a 3-time Olympian is crazy. I mean, very few people get to say that, and makes me really proud to be able to like represent those friends and family and communities that have helped me get here in that way. I'm sure you're excited as well to get out there and compete.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's super neat. And I think it's like, it's so interesting, right? Like what you were saying about, you know, you compete at trials and then all of a sudden you just like go to the Olympics. And I think it's important to reflect on the accomplishment that is, like making a team, even if it's not your first team, like it's still a really big accomplishment. So I think that's awesome that you're giving yourself the deserved pat on the back. Because I feel like I see a lot of people, especially that are like pretty accomplished in sport, that are just like, oh yeah, going to my 3rd Olympics, going to my 4th Olympic, like it's casual. And you're like, that is not a casual thing.
Yeah. When you make your 3rd team though, it is funny because it's like, you know what to expect. You've been there before. You're like kind of a veteran when it comes to those events. It becomes less special in a weird way, but also more special in a different way. So I find it funny. I find this with a lot of track athletes where it's like the forever moving goalpost too, where it's you just had accomplished something and it's like, okay, what's the next thing? Like, what's the next goal? And at a certain point in your career, you're not gonna like, it's impossible to keep hitting those goals, right? You can't just keep getting better forever. There's a certain point where you'll kind of plateau, you'll hit your peak, and you're not going to hit some goal that you set forward. And because of that, most athletes that I've met, not just in track, but like Olympic athletes I've met, have almost a feeling of like regret or resentment towards their last few years in the sport, feeling like they had more to give and they just couldn't do it for whatever reason. And noticing that, I just like don't want to leave the sport like that. So I want to make sure I'm going into, I don't know how many years I have left, but I'm definitely closer to the end of my career than I am the start of my career. And I just want to make sure that through these last few years that I'm going into it with a perspective that's like, enjoy this for what it is, and, you know, appreciate the people around you and support the people around you, and just try to be in the moment as much as possible and take it in for what it is and have a good time, rather than viewing it as something that's just a means to an end, and have it be something that I regret not appreciating when I'm older, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is excellent advice. I think this is my last question, but do you have any like superstitions or things that you do like when you're competing that are always the same?
I really don't. It's a really lame answer. I know people who wear like the same socks or like the same headband every single time they compete. I think one of the things I've worked on with my sports psych is getting away from those like superstition things, because
Yeah.
I used to, it was less superstitions, but more like I have to feel or like feel a certain way or do a certain thing before the meet in order to know that I'm ready, when you kind of need to just be ready whenever. That being said, like I'm a very like anxious person, and part of my routine is just like knowing that I'm going to be super nervous and anxious, and I've tried to turn that into like a trigger to know I'm ready, versus being like something that I just worked like turns into like a negative worry, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I really don't have any like, you know, I have to have a soda a certain number of hours before, or wear certain socks or things like that. Do you?
I am a little bit of a superstitious person. Like I have a lucky sports bra, but I also understand and have gotten the same sports psych advice from my sports psych about.
Yeah.
And I do think it's true. Like you have to perform no matter what, no matter how you're feeling, no matter what, you know, whatever recovery tests say, like you got to be good in any condition. I guess I also just meant like, I mean, obviously you probably throw the same way, but I was wondering if like it's like tennis where like people have ticks or whatever that they'll do like as part of their throwing routine.
That is a little different, and I definitely have nervous tics. I wear, there's a couple. Well, one, when I yell, and if you end up watching me throw at the Olympics, you'll know when I have a good throw or not based on how I usually say like, I yell like an ah, and then I say come on. But depending on the tone of the come on will be dependent on how good the throw was. So if it's like, ah, come on, then you know it's a bad throw. Or if it's like a come on, you know it was a good throw.
Oh.
I don't even really realize I do it until I watch the videos after. The other thing is you have to wear a glove when you throw the hammer. It protects your hand. And I wear this like sticky, like almost like pine tar on I put it on my other hand so that it like adheres to the glove a little bit. And when I'm off to the side, like waiting for my throw, I'm just like constantly putting that stuff in my hand and then just rubbing it off, and then realizing that I need it for the throw. So then I put more of it on my hand, and then I rub it off, and then I put more. It's just like a constant cycle where I'm just sitting there and just doing it over and over and over again. It's like very clearly like a nervous tic that I don't realize I'm doing in the moment. Sometimes I'll catch myself and be like, stop, you don't need to put it on right now, just wait. But I think I like to do it. It like calms me down, like doing it over and over and over again.
I understand. Yeah, I understand.
You see like crazy pictures of like me during the throw of like my face. I try to keep my face really relaxed, but you'll see crazy pictures of like my cheeks looks like they're getting blown in the wind. And I'm sure you have your fair share of crazy sports pictures, but throwing pictures are particularly funny just because of the amount of force you generate in the throw.
That's funny. No, that is exactly what I meant. Thank you for indulging my kind of weird question.
Of course.
I always ask at the end if people have questions for me. You did ask me some questions already, so I don't know if you have any other ones. No worries if not.
No, just like how you feeling? You feeling good for Paris?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel good. I feel like, you know, it's so funny. Like, I think the ideal scenario is that the Olympics is just like any other race. or like any other day. You know, we
Of course.
train really hard all the time. And I think it's like doing all of the right things so that you can be in that headspace when you get there of like, I'm ready and I'm chill and I'm all these things. So it's definitely weird. Like right now there's, you know, more hype and more excitement and the Olympic stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny. People keep being like, are you excited for all of the stuff, you know, the other Olympic stuff? And I'm like, I'm actually just really excited to race. Like I'm actually just really excited for the actual competition. And then I'm sure all the other stuff is going to be like so fun. And, you know, obviously in Tokyo, we didn't get to do anything.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, that's how it should be. So
yeah, I don't know. How do you feel?
I feel good. I feel similar. Like I said before, like I've had kind of a weird season. I really haven't had many chances to compete. So I am excited to just like compete again and have another chance to throw far. But also part of that comes with some nervousness where I'm like, how prepared am I going to be? But I can't really control that aspect of it. It's really just about, like you said, trying to make it feel just as normal of a day as possible, which can be really difficult. So if you are able to achieve that kind of thing, that's, I think, kind of special. But kind of like what we were talking about, trying to still appreciate the Olympics and being there and having it both be more than just another event, but also, you know, when you're competing, having it but just be another event is ideal, but very difficult. So, but you're going to do great. We're both going to do great regardless. So
yeah, we're all going to do so great.
yeah.
When do you compete?
I compete pretty early. The second and early for track. The second and the fourth is the final. So if I qualify for the finals on the second, I compete the fourth as well. But we only have 2 rounds. What's your first round?
So rowing is all the first week.
Okay.
So we'll be done. I think August 1st is like the day my final would be. But yeah, we can hypothetically go and like watch everything the second week, which is pretty cool.
Nice. Are you going to stay till closing?
Yep.
Nice.
Very excited. So it'll be fun. I know. I'm like, what am I going to do that whole week? Like, I never have a week of nothing to do, but I'm sure the time will be filled.
You'll be busy. Are you going to do opening too, or is it too early or is it too close to the start of your comp?
No, we compete like the next day. So
Yeah.
Do you guys go to the opening ceremonies?
We can, but I did it in 2016, which was a lot of fun, but you stand for hours.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing to prepare you to compete. So there's a week between, but you know, missing 2 days of training after that isn't really worth it. So not going to do it this time around, but I don't know if I'm going to stay all the way through to the closing, but if I'm not doing the opening, maybe I'll do the closing. Haven't finalized that yet, but we'll see.
Well, thank you so much. I super appreciate you taking the time, and this was super fun, and I hope I get to come see you compete. That would be awesome.
Yeah, same. I hope I see you out there. Best of luck with your training and everything leading into it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening, and thanks so much to Rudy for coming on and taking the time to chat with me so close to the Olympics. I really appreciate it, and all of his honesty and vulnerability in our conversation. I can't wait to cheer Rudy on in Paris. Hopefully I'll be able to make it to some of his competition. So to leave you this week, I'm sharing a quote from this book I've been reading, which is called The Master, The Long Run and Beautiful Game of Roger Federer, written by Christopher Clarey. And he writes, "Are you at peace with yourself? Is your overall life plan more or less in a place which gives you the fundamental joy to be here in this moment?" I just really liked that for pre-racing vibes. So thanks for listening. Have a great week. See you next time. Bye. I'd love to hear from you. So send us a topic suggestion, or if you'd like to submit a question for our Ask Kristi Anything segment, head to our website, theother3years.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Other 3 Years podcast, part of the Bright Sided Network.